Hello and good evening. Londoners have been paying tribute to Nelson Mandela, thanking him for his legacy and describing him as a man who changed the world. The former South African president visited the capital a number of times, thanking the city for its support for anti-apartheid campaigns. Flowers and candles have been laid at his statue in Parliament Square. Books of condolence have been opened at Westminster Abbey and South Africa House, where the Mayor's message saluted a man who brought people together by the simple power of forgiveness and love. Our special correspondent, Kurt Barling, reports.
Nelson Mandela was no stranger to London. In 1962, before the trial which sentenced him to 27 years in prison, he toured the capital to drum up support from sympathetic British leaders. Dennis Healy was his political guide.
I was asked by a friend of his called Mary Benson, who was a nurse during the war, whom I knew during the war, introduce him to Hugh Gaitskell. That was the reason. He wanted to meet Hugh, who was then the leader of the Labour Party.
Mr. Mandela's commitment and judgment changed his country peacefully, but also cemented his reputation as the global figure people today wanted to pay thanks to.
I woke up this morning and I thought, okay, this is the Rainbow Nation. I am wearing blue, red, yellow, whatever colour I can find.
And the whole ethos of what he is about not only changed South Africa, it changed the world.
And to come out and have that humanity of forgiveness is just fantastic. And it teaches the world what we should be like.
His visit to Brixton in 1996 is now part of London folklore because it not only turned heads, but for those who were there, changed minds.
I think his visit to Brixton enabled us to start thinking differently, because you can't fight your way out of problems every day. You've got to think of another strategy. And he came and he united Brixton. Nobody else has achieved that.
By coming to Brixton, what we're actually seeing is how somebody who has been at the heart of overcoming the biggest atrocities that the human condition can endure, that comes here as an example of the obstacles and difficulties that our people can overcome, to inspire the communities that are here.
And there was just a rainbow of people of all different backgrounds, all different generations, awaiting this guy's arrival and just being massively inspired by him.
Today, the current London mayor paid his own tribute to the transformational power of the man his people called Madiba.
I'm of the generation, Kurt, as you can imagine, that grew up in awe and admiration of Nelson Mandela. I think, but it's unquestionably true that in my party, over the last 50 years or so, there were people who took a different line, and I think they would now say that they were wrong, and that is plain.
Mandela's presence will remain in the capital with our memories and his statues, above all, the one which stands facing Parliament, where once he stood and dreamed of an apartheid-free South Africa before embarking on his own and his people's long march to freedom. Kurt Barling, BBC London News.
Nelson Mandela's strong connections with London there. Well, in a moment, we'll cross to Trafalgar Square and our reporter Helen Drew, who's at South Africa House, where a vigil is being held. But first, let's go to Assad Ahmed, who's in Parliament Square, where all day Londoners have been leaving tributes. Assad.
And Riz, let's take a look at some of those tributes, many different forms. You can see flowers at the foot of Nelson Mandela's statue, candles being lit, messages of support, cards being written, so many things. But one thing you don't get an idea for when you look at this, the tribute of tears which have rolled down the faces of men and women who Nelson Mandela epitomised freedom, justice and forgiveness for. And they've come here on their way home from work to remember the man who was a symbol of all these things. And amongst the cards being left here, this one, it says, Mandela, you are the member of my family I never met. My grandparents told me great things about this person, a peaceful, patient man striving for equality always. Today the world grieves, and that just sums up exactly how so many people are feeling here tonight as they come here to lay flowers. Madam, you've come here to lay flowers. Where have you come from today?
I've come all the way from southeast London, and we just wanted to pay respects to Nelson Mandela. I was here when the statue went up, and I just felt I needed to be here to pay my respects to this great spirit. who he was. He's had such an impact on my life, and I just wanted to be here with everyone else, friends, family, just to honour him.
Right, and let's speak to some of these people. Madam, where have you come from today?
From Brixton.
And you're here with your grandchildren?
And my daughter, Bridget.
And you've all come. Why have you come?
Well, because he spread the love. You know, he draws you to him because he's got a lot of love. And they always say love conquers hate.
OK, well, thank you very much. I'll leave you to lay your flowers. Well, this isn't the only place in London where tributes are being made for Nelson Mandela. Just down the road from here at Trafalgar Square, the South Africa House. There, a vigil is taking place tonight, and it's from there we can join my colleague, Helen Drew. Helen.
Thanks, Assad. There are hundreds of people here for the vigil this evening outside South Africa House. And before the vigil even began, people have been coming throughout the day to pay their respects. We've already heard from the Mayor, Boris Johnson. He was here earlier, as was David Cameron. Now, South Africa House played a focal feature in the anti-apartheid movement in the 1970s and 80s. And as Carl Mercer now reports, that movement started here in the capital.
The Springboks came to Twickenham, but the police got there first. They came by motorbike, by horse, and in a dozen Black Mariahs. 500 of them ready to deal with the anti-apartheid demonstrators who had threatened to smash the South African rugby players' British tour.
London, 1969, 10 years after the anti-apartheid movement was born in the capital, and one of the biggest demonstrations against the South African regime this country had seen.
The teams ran out to a mixed response. Cheers from the rugby enthusiasts, boos and whistles from the demonstrators.
For years, anti-apartheid protesters gathered outside the South African embassy. London was at the centre of a worldwide movement.
For about 10 years, people occupying the street outside the South Africa House. You had, we used to have a sort of headquarters for the ANC, Mandela's party, here in London. It was bombed by agents of South Africa. I can remember we were all denounced as being in favour of a communist state in South Africa, whereas actually all Mandela wanted was equality for everybody.
This is Gower Street North in Camden, where the boycott movement and the anti-apartheid movement was first founded back in 1959.
It had all started from more humble beginnings when South African exiles met in North London to form the boycott movement, to campaign against South African goods.
Many future African leaders were based in London, so in a sense it was natural that London would become the focal point for the struggle against apartheid internationally.
In 1984, what started as a protest song became an anthem. The man who wrote it, still a musician in London.
It was played inside football stadiums in South Africa, which was amazing to see on the news, because that was the only place black people were allowed to congregate, so that the UDF, the United Democratic Front, used to play it there, and also ANC used to make speeches in the football stadiums, amazingly.
The song proved the centrepiece of the Mandela concert 4 years later at Wembley, London, sending an anti-apartheid message around the world. Christabel Gurney was part of that message for years, running the anti-apartheid news. The copy's now yellowing with age, but, she says, an important part of the story.
The main impetus to the change in South Africa was, of course, the people inside the country who rose up in the 80s and the African National Congress. But I think that the collapse of apartheid was greatly helped by the sanctions campaign.
Badges and banner headlines made in London, it seems, were not in vain. Carl Mercer, BBC London News.
We heard in Carl's report there from someone who was the vice chair of the anti-apartheid movement here in the 1980s and 90s. Someone else who was part of that movement is Leila Kogbara, who joins me now. Hello, Leila. You met Mr. Mandela, didn't you?
I did. We were invited to breakfast at Buckingham Palace. So basically, when Mandela came to Britain after being released, he asked to meet with Archbishop Trevor Huddleston, basically to say thank you to him and to the British people and to the anti-apartheid movement for the role they played in freeing him and ending apartheid. It was unbelievable.
What was he like?
I can't describe. In a way, he was very low-key. It was like having breakfast with your grandfather. There were just 5 of us round a table and him and just having a conversation. And he asked me whether I wasn't hungry, was I on a diet, because I just couldn't eat. But he was amazing, just the understated gravitas in a way, but it really made you feel comfortable. He was amazing, but not arrogant at all.
Very down-to-earth man.
Very, very down-to-earth, just like having private breakfast for your granddad, to be honest.
Layla, lovely. Thank you very much. We'll let you get back to the vigil.
Okay, thank
that
you.
vigil is going on until just after 7:30 this evening. It is a 95-minute vigil to mark the 95 years of Nelson Mandela's life.
From Trafalgar Square, Helen, thank you. And from Parliament Square, Assad, thank you to you too. Well, with me now are two people who knew Nelson Mandela, his goddaughter, Tanya von Ahlefeldt,